I just know you're ready to hear about a little crime. Welcome to Crime Daddies.
Welcome back, everybody, to our podcast, and thank you all for being here with us today and listening along for this crazy case that Jacob's going to bring today. I am Hunter, co-host of Crime Daddies.
And I am Jacob, the other co-host, and we are glad to have you guys with us. First and foremost, thank you so much for tuning in last week to our very first episode. We got a lot of feedback from you guys. We got a lot of things that we're going to try and work on, and a lot of positives you guys like, and so I'm glad you're rocking with us, and we're going to stay rocking with you guys as long as you'll have us.
And I honestly enjoyed hearing the negative feedback that we got because, listen, Tied Up in Tallapoosa, the first episode we dropped, I feel like the research was there, and I feel like we presented it pretty well, but I'm stupid when I read on a paper, and well, not a paper, but like when I'm reading the facts through my phone screen and my brain doesn't transmit the words to my mouth right, it kind of makes me sound like I'm ignorant.
You're beating yourself up too much, dude. I think people really liked it. I think the general consensus was that they liked the story, they had fun with it. I can't tell you how many people stopped me, even at church, and said, "Hey, we listened to your podcast." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you listened to that podcast episode? Like, really?" And here we are at church, and I was like, "Please don't talk about it." Let's probably not want to bring that up right now, but we've had a lot of positive feedback. Even my boss at work was happy and excited, and she said that she likes true crime, and so she was really pumped to have this. And she was like, "Can I listen to your next episode now?" And I was like, "Nope, you gotta wait till next Tuesday."
Hey, the more you all listen, the more that you get us out there, and the more that you share, the more that you rate the podcast on the streaming platform, the more that you like and comment on YouTube. Once we start seeing some numbers coming our way and we feel like we have to release twice a week, we will definitely bring that to you all.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we are men of the people. And so if you guys want more crime daddies is what you're going to get. For now, we're just going to try and focus on putting out some really solid quality cases and letting you guys enjoy your time with us.
And we are actually recording more than one case a week right now, but we're just trying to get a vault built up of cases so that when the time does come, we are able to just drop at least twice a week.
Yeah, so we appreciate you guys, and now let's get you guys into some crime. That's what you're here for, right?
I'm honestly excited to hear what you brought to the table today, Jacob.
Well, let me tell you, Hunter, if you're excited, then you're going to have to step into my time machine for a moment as I take you all the way back to 1943. You ready?
I am ready. My grandpa was just born in 1938, so about 5 years prior, and he was just a wee little lad at this time.
See, my grandpa was just a swimmer in his daddy's sack at that point because he wasn't born until 49. He wasn't quite there yet. But our story begins all the way back in August 11th of 1943, which is the day that Miss Elizabeth Jean Williams was born. And now Elizabeth, she goes by Betty, so that's what I'm going to call her during this case. She was born in Odessa, Texas, and before we even get into what happened to her, I really want to just paint the picture for you and tell you about the world she was living in, because this case doesn't unfold the same way anywhere else at any time else. I'm fully confident if these things happen today, the story outcome might be a little bit different. So I'm going to set the scene for you. Odessa in the 1950s and early 1960s was an oil town through and through. Everything about it was built around hard work, survival, reputation, and structure. It was working class, it was deeply conservative, and heavily shaped by religion. Not to say that's a bad thing. My life is heavily shaped by religion, but that just kind of gives you some context about the people in this town at the time.
How many oil executives do you think rode around with some white Cadillacs with bullhorns on the hood?
All of them. It's Texas, right?
Right.
I was
Honestly, if that was it, that would be me.
I mean,
I like to classify as high class white trash.
Did you ever watch Fairly Odd Parents growing up?
Yes.
Doug Dimmadome is what I picture. These guys.
I could see that.
Just all white, Cadillac, horns on the front, and just money. And so this town, it kind of grew substantially by the time between 1940 and 1960. So it went from having a population of about 30,000 people within 20 years to having a population of about 85,000 people.
Well, also you got to think that time period was when all the men were coming back from the Second World War, and that's the baby boomer generation. So they were cranking them out.
They were putting babies out there, and it doesn't hurt that there was tons of oil jobs, so guys just naturally moved to Texas, had a lot of children, and population shot up quick. But the thing about towns like this is they don't just create expectations, they enforce them. Sometimes they do it quietly, sometimes they do it pretty loud. But at all times, it's consistent. People watch, people talk, and people remember pretty easily. And Betty, poor Betty, she didn't really fit that mold. So, according to some investigative reporting by Miss Pamela Koloff in the Texas Monthly, Betty grew up in a working-class home. Her father, John, was a carpenter, and he kind of struggled to find steady work, and her mother, Mary, worked at J.C. Penney, and so I wouldn't say they were a part of the rich crowd in Odessa at the time. You know, he wasn't a part of the oil boom. He was just doing some blue-collar carpentry work, and like I said, he really struggled to find steady work at this time.
The likeliness of Betty's mother still having a job at J.C. Penney in today's economy is probably very low because pretty well all of them is shut down, it seems like.
Yeah, they're a dying breed. I think around this time is whenever they started to pop off and get really big, though. But they did live in a nice, modest house, and they lived near the oil fields. Not completely unstable, but not completely comfortable either. Like, if anything were to happen, if her dad wouldn't be able to find a job to work on, then it would definitely take a hit to the family. So it created some instability in the house.
The dad was for sure the breadwinner.
Yeah, he definitely was. And I'm sure all of our listeners out there that are tradesmen, run their own businesses, you know, whenever you're not getting business and you're not getting customers in, it might mean something else for the family for the time being. It could be tough, you know.
Fun fact, I am a diesel mechanic, and my wife is actually a teacher, and I make more than double her salary. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying to put that into perspective. Like, a lot of the blue-collar guys that are in blue-collar trades tend to make decent money, and you definitely are the breadwinner of your family if that's your position.
Oh, yeah. But this kind of environment that Betty grew up in, it just created, I guess I'd say, a sense of stress because it felt like there was something always boiling under the surface. Nothing ever felt really secure. And that wasn't just financial pressure, as I'm sure you know, being middle class, lower middle class, there's a lot of financial pressure. But for her, there was also a big emotional dynamic that shaped her. Her father was described as a strict Baptist, deeply religious, and often critical of her behavior. According to the reporting, he would lecture her about sin and pray that she would become a more obedient daughter. So imagine growing up in a house where you're constantly being corrected, constantly being told what to do, constantly being told to change, constantly being reminded that who you are might not be enough. Like I said, 1960s Texas, you want your family to fit that picture-perfect mold. You don't want anyone to stick out.
Fun fact, I honestly relate to this because my grandfather has been a pastor for like 60-something years. He's been a pastor ever since my mom was real little. So he's been a pastor since probably the late 60s. And, you know, there's the saying talking about like the preacher's daughter.
Oh, yeah.
Well, here's the deal. My mom, my uncle, all of me and my cousins, all super wild when we were younger. So it's kind of true.
Yeah, I think the stereotype definitely fits. And I mean, in this case, it for sure does. Betty, she really pushed back because there was a lot of tension, and this tension.
But let's be honest. Who honestly enjoys being told what to do? Because I don't.
Nobody does. I remember everyone's rebellious, but at that time, it was hard for a woman to be rebellious. It was a kind of like, be quiet, be picture perfect, don't speak up, just do what you got to do, especially in a place like that. Now, if she would have lived in another part of the country where, I don't know how to say this, that leans a little bit more left, she might have been listened to more and been accepted for what she wanted to be. But it's a part of the town. Not to say what's right and wrong. That's not for me to decide. But I'm just trying to say this is kind of what shapes her.
The only person on this planet that can tell me what to do is my wife, and that's only because if I don't listen to her, I will end up as a victim on my own podcast.
Don't worry, I would cover it, and then I would try and do an interview with you from the grave. I'd get a Ouija board out here, and I'd be having you talk to me.
Oh.
I'd interview her from the prison cell.
She'd love that.
Right. According to that same reporter, they noted that Betty talked a lot about segregation, and she pushed back about segregation in her school. Like I said, 1960s, it's going on. It's the normal. And Betty, she really didn't like that. She is a human, and she was also a Christian, so she believed, as the Bible says, that we're all made in the image of God and we're all equals. Whenever she was going to school and being in this small Texas town, it kind of all felt like believing in no segregation was against the grain.
That's what's so awesome about being a part of the millennial generation. And Jacob is, I guess, Gen Z.
I'm a Gen Zer through and through.
I'm barely a millennial by like a year or two.
Yeah.
But I feel like our generations have really changed the course into being more accepting of everybody. Because like when I was in school, we only had like maybe 4 black kids, but like everybody got along with each other. Like
Yeah.
I can't necessarily say there is any hardcore racism I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's just like you're talking about, it's a sign of the times, and I feel like things have definitely progressed for the better. Not to say that things can't happen. I've witnessed things happen firsthand that kind of make me scratch my head and wonder, okay, what's the point in this? But if I'm going to just try and flash back to being in the 1960s, I'm sure it became even a more of a talking point whenever she's like the only person in school that brings it up. To me, it's kind of normal, but back then, I bet the things that she was saying was like shocking to her classmates.
There's some white lady that was from Mississippi. I can't remember her name for the life of me. She was actually an activist that would stand up for segregation in Mississippi back in the 60s.
Yeah.
And she actually went to jail and all kinds of stuff and got beat up and different things.
Yeah, so that was kind of Betty's vibe. Like that's what she was on.
I wish I could remember that lady's name.
We'll look it up at some point. But so some of the things she did is she listened to this guy named Lenny Bruce, who at the time was considered very controversial. He had like a radio show, and he would talk about more left-leaning ideologies. He talked about controversial and inappropriate things, and by inappropriate, I mean things that Christians don't really talk about. That's really hush-hush. You know, if you're a perfect Christian, you don't talk about sex and you don't talk about whatever you're doing. This guy was a comedian, but he was also an activist, and he talked about a lot of this stuff on his radio show. And she actively listened to him. And in this time period in West Texas, that wasn't something that really earned you respect. It really just made you different. And different in a place like Odessa doesn't mean interesting. It means you're kind of suspicious. People just watch you a little closer. They talk about you a little more. They judge you a little faster. And over time, that starts to build a bit of a reputation. Now, here's the important part. Standing out didn't mean she didn't want to belong. In fact, everything about her suggests the opposite, right? She wanted to be seen. Whenever you have these beliefs, you're not hiding the beliefs. You're pretty vocal. You're out there. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be liked. She wanted to matter in that environment. And it was just kind of hard for her because the people that were in that environment didn't like those things.
She's just like every other teenager. She just wants to be heard and accepted.
Exactly. But instead of being accepted, she became someone that people defined. And once that happens in high school, it's kind of hard to undo because Odessa High School is kind of like that stereotypical high school you might see in like movies where they have like a class system. You know, you have your preppy girls, you have your jocks, you have your nerds, you have your stoners, like, you know, what you see on TV and everything. On top of this hierarchy of this class system were the football players. I mean, it's Texas. Texas loves football more than they love anything else. And that's where most of the attention was at that school. That's where their approval was, and that's where the town's pride lived. They loved their football team. And right at the center of that world was John Mack Herring, who goes by Mack. It's his nickname. I actually think it's just his middle name, and he goes by Mack. And he was the kind of person that Odessa really understood. He was a football player. He was good looking. He was quiet. He was steady. And according to reporting, he wasn't necessarily the biggest star, but he didn't really need to be. He fit the mold perfect. Like, he didn't stand out. He wasn't the best player on the football team, but he was definitely someone everyone knew.
So I'm going to put this into perspective based off what you're saying. If you guys have ever seen the movie Varsity Blues.
Yeah.
Okay, so Varsity Blues, it's pretty well about a small town that's like super huge into football, like Jacob's saying how Texas is. And these football players that was on the team in the movie Varsity Blues, they literally could get away with anything and they did whatever they wanted to. The cops didn't get on to them. The school didn't get on to them. They literally just got away with doing anything just because they played football.
Yeah, and so remember Varsity Blues. If you've watched it, you know what we're talking about. And believe me, I remember the first time I watched it because that movie was like, I'm not going to get into it, but that one scene with the teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You
So
know what I'm talking
listen,
about.
back in my day when we used to party and we, drinking and having fun.
Yeah.
Anytime somebody would throw up, what we would quote exact from that movie, "Puke and rally."
You can rally. Yep.
Calling dinosaurs.
But yeah, I mean, that describes it perfect. He was perfect. He had the right background. He fit the mold. He had the right demeanor. He had the right image. Not only that, but his father owned an electrical business, which meant he was stable. And so even from that, we see that he comes from a different household than Betty does, because his home is from a successful business owner who's stable, whereas Betty comes from a home that's unstable, who has a dad that may not get a job this week and he might have less money than he needed. But Mack's parents are pretty successful, well off. Their son's well liked. He's on the football team. Everything just fits pretty well for Mack. So whenever people looked at Mack, they saw a future. But whenever they looked at poor Betty, they really saw uncertainty. And so whenever these two people came together, that difference didn't really disappear. It actually becomes more important. Betty and Mack became involved, and by that I mean they were probably dating. There's some reports of a romantic relationship, and for Betty, that relationship meant more than just having a boyfriend. It meant validation. It meant like, now I fit in. I'm a part of the school. It meant she has connection to a part of the school structure that she had always been outside of before.
So back in the day, they would call this going steady. They were going steady. They were going out and doing a twist.
Exactly. They're going out and twisting it. Not like that, but you know what I'm saying. But unfortunately, the relationship didn't last. Mack broke things off with her, and he started seeing another girl. And according to letters later cited in reporting, that breakup really deeply affected Betty. Not just emotionally, but now it made her feel more alienated socially. Like she was on the outs, and then she got in, and then she got kicked right back out.
Well, I mean, yeah, you just got dumped by a guy that has, in today's terms, a bunch of clout.
Yeah, he had clout, he had money, and you were a part of that, and then he just high and dry leaves you, and he's with another girl. I mean, anyone's going to be kind of upset about that. But now Betty wasn't just dealing with loss, she was dealing with being replaced. And in a small town, that's not really private. Like I said, you're going to know everything. You know everybody's business. It's pretty visible. And so at the same time, things at home were also not improving. There was an account from a friend that Betty's father had went through her belongings and found her diary, and he read entries about boys, which only made the tension worse. So now her dad's mad at her because she's interested in boys, but he wants her to be a perfect Christian daughter and not fall into temptation.
Never go through your kid's diary, first of all. Like, that is such an invasion of privacy. And I guess today's society, never go through your kids' phone notes.
Yeah, I mean, there's things in my phone notes that I just write down that can be just stupid things I need to jot down real quick, but sometimes I need to just get something off my head, put it in my notes, and I know if someone went through that, I'd feel very vulnerable. So now Betty's feeling a lot of pressure from every direction. She's feeling pressure at home. She's feeling pressure at school. At home, she's being corrected and judged by her dad. At school, she's being talked about by everybody. And emotionally, she's also just trying to process this big breakup that happened. And you know, whenever you're a teenager, your feelings are just so big. Like, everything is blown out of proportion. Everything hurts more. Everything's funnier whenever you're a kid because, I mean, you're going through puberty. So it's part of it. And this is where things begin to shift in a way that, looking back, feels very impossible to ignore. And so this is whenever things started to take a darker turn.
But also things back then were like, everyone was way more insensitive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they didn't really care about a lot of things, and we'll get into it real quick. So according to multiple classmates interviewed later, Betty began talking about wanting to die. So she's exhibiting suicidal tendencies, not casually. She doesn't just bring it up as a joke. Like, I know in today's age, I remember being 15 and joking with friends like, kill yourself, just messing around, because it's not something that's light. But people said whenever Betty talked about it, it was repeatedly. She would say, I'm just better off dead. Or she'd talk about heaven as if it was someplace she wanted to go to soon. Some accounts describe her as taking aspirin in excess or climbing into the rafters of the school auditorium. These like little things that show she's having some troubles mentally. She's not taking full attempts at her life, but she's definitely giving out some gestures, some big signals saying something's not right here, right?
She's definitely putting out warning signs that people should be realizing.
But unfortunately, the people around her didn't really interpret them this way. They said that she's just being a drama queen. She's just seeking out attention. She's such an overreactor. Like, you just got dumped. Get over it, is what they were saying.
I'm sure she was seeking attention for somebody. I'm sure she was seeking attention so that she could find somebody she could talk to.
But again, judgy town, judgy people, and she didn't fit into the clique. And so the clique's going to talk about her.
Because, I mean, think about it. Think about having a best friend that you feel like you could tell anything to without any judgment. And if they do give you judgment, it's only because they're trying to give you good criticism because they love you.
And I think criticism is very important. I think it helps us all grow. But this is kind of where it escalates, and because of that, nothing really changed. So students involved in the school play, which Betty was really involved in theater, later said that she had asked multiple boys that were a part of the play if they would kill her. That's not very vague. That's pretty straight up, like walking up to somebody and saying, "Hey, could you kill me?" That's not leaving anything up for interpretation. That's pretty cut and dry.
No, you'd definitely be thinking she was kind of crazy.
Yeah, to say the least. I mean, if someone came up to me, good friend or not, it's going to definitely throw me off a bit.
I mean, nowadays you tell people that you're getting arrested because when you threaten suicide, you get arrested, but
Yep.
also you end up in a mental hospital
Yeah, you do.
to get evaluated.
And there was one classmate that later on said she had overheard Betty saying that she had talked Mack into doing it. Now, this was just speculation at the time, but another one said that she just always thought Betty was joking. And that right there is one of the most critical points in this entire story, because these statements from her classmates are real. They were said, they were heard by many ears, but they weren't believed. So now we're going to move on to March of 1961. Betty's 17, and our old boy Mack, he's also 17. So this is the night that everything actually happens. Betty is at a rehearsal for the school play. It's a normal night on the surface, nothing that's outwardly unusual. A classmate named Ike Nail drives her home around 10 p.m. Before she goes inside, she sets something up. She tells him to come back in about 30 minutes and meet her in the alley behind her house. Ike agrees, and when he comes back, she comes out of the house, and she slips out the back door. She's wearing pale pink pajamas and a blue and white striped duster. Now, for those who don't know, a duster is kind of like a long coat.
I was thinking like a Plymouth Duster.
Yeah, I mean, similar to
like
that.
an old Joe Dirt car.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
Maybe not that, but you might see like people that work with cattle or are in rodeos wear a duster sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the kind of coat. Like I said, it's Texas. But she's not really dressed to go out. Like, she's just wearing her PJs and she's dressed comfortable, and I'm sure it's probably chilly. It's 10:30 at night. So she put a jacket on. She's not planning a normal night. So her and Mr. Ike sit in the car for a little while talking. Now, there's reports that maybe her and Ike had been romantically involved. I don't want to speculate because I can't find anything that's really substantial that says that. But while they're sitting there talking, headlights appear and everything changes. Betty recognizes the car that pulled up behind them immediately. It's Mack, her ex-boyfriend. According to Ike, she says, quote, "Oh my God, I didn't think he'd actually come," end quote. And that line carries so much weight because it suggests there was some uncertainty. Like even she wasn't sure this moment was actually going to happen. She gets out of Ike's car, walks over to Mack's Jeep, and before she leaves, she says something that would echo through this case forever. To Ike, she looks at him and says, quote, "I've got to call his bluff, even if he kills me," end quote. And I hate to tell you guys this, but this is the last confirmed moment anyone ever sees Betty Williams alive again. You ready to hear the next part, Hunter?
Yeah, calling somebody's bluff, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's going to go well.
And you're right. So the next day, her mother reports her missing. She didn't show up for school. She didn't show up back at home. Police begin investigating, talking to classmates, and trying to build a timeline.
Where's Mack?
Well, eventually, they find out through Ike that the last time that she was seen was getting into Mack's car. Mack's Jeep, to be specific. So eventually, they bring our old boy Mack into questioning. Now, at first, he denies any involvement. He said it was a normal day. He just rode around with her in his Jeep, talked. You know, it's his ex-girlfriend. They wanted to hang out. And says he dropped her off later that night. But that story really doesn't hold. How would he drop her off at her house and she just disappears off the face of the earth? Where would she go?
With Ike.
I mean, that's where they had thought, but under pressure, Mack actually makes a very shocking confession. He tells police that Betty asked him to kill her. Now, obviously, police are stunned. They're like, okay, this is coming out of nowhere.
All right, pause. Could you imagine interrogating a teenager and then hearing those words come out of his mouth?
Yeah, and I mean, I would be shocked. And again, they know this guy. He's on the football team, and I'm sure these guys know him. Like I said, Mack's dad is a prominent businessman in the community. He plays on the football team. He's known around the school. I'm sure these cops might have kids that are in school. They probably know this kid. And so they probably think whenever we bring him in for questioning, it's going to be routine, and he's going to say, oh, I didn't know this happened, and blah, blah, blah. But after barely any poking and prodding, out of nowhere, he just says, Yep, I did it. She asked me to kill her. So obviously they're stunned. And then they said, okay, well, what happened? Where'd this take place? Can you give us details? And he said, well, let me just take you to my father's hunting lease. So they drive about 26 miles right outside Odessa to a very isolated, quiet area, a place where there would be no witnesses, no interruption. And there on the property is a stock pond. Investigators start looking around at the crime scene, and they notice that there had recently, within the past couple days, been people out there. Find footprints. Eventually, they find some blood near the water. They ask Mack where the body is, and he points to the water and says she's in there.
Water?
The water.
Why is there a blood trail leading to water?
Well, Hunter, I'm about to tell you. So he points at the water, says she's in there, and these cops, they don't know what to believe. They don't know if he's lying. They don't know if he's giving them the old runaround. And they said, if she's in there, go get her.
What? Why would they have him go get her?
I don't know. Like I said,
I'm pretty sure that they got a dive team, they got state police, they got
not
sheriff
quite.
department.
It's 1960s.
Isn't that who's supposed to go recover bodies?
Maybe nowadays, I'm sure, but back then, small town stuff, they just don't have the same thought processes.
Let's go have the undetermined killer at this point. Just go get the body.
But weird thing,
that makes no sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. And the weird thing is, Mack obliges. He's like, okay, so he rolls his sleeves up, gets in the water, and he starts to wade around and feel, and he gets about, I don't know, nipple deep in the water.
Nipple deep?
Yeah. I don't know. Let me go look that up. No, I'm just joking, but he got probably chest deep, and that's whenever they saw him go under, and he came up with a body.
So he knew exactly where it was.
He did. And so when he brings her out, she's still in those loose, pale pink pajamas with weights tied to her body.
What?
Weights.
What kind of weights did it specify?
It didn't really specify. It just said that.
This is kind of sounding like a mafia hit right now.
Yeah, it sounds like he was trying to make her sleep with the fishes. But what's more disturbing is not only did they see that she had been underwater, but now they had saw what actually ended Betty's life. A shotgun blast to the head.
A shotgun?
Shotgun.
Does it specify what gauge?
I think in the reports now, this is speculation. I don't have them in front of me. I think it said 12-gauge shotgun.
Was her head still on her body?
I don't know. It doesn't say, but they said there was a lot of blood splatter on the grass around the water.
I have shot melons with a shotgun, and
there's not much melon left.
Nope, it obliterates that melon.
Yep.
That is crazy. Why'd he put her in the water?
Why? Why shoot her with a 12 gauge? If you love this woman,
that's crazy.
Why not? Okay.
All right, I'm just going to say this already. Almost the entire majority of women that do take their own life, they don't do it to where it alters what they look like because they still want to look beautiful at a funeral. And also what doesn't make sense to me is going back to saying how they present themselves when they are dead. Why would she want to be found in pajamas? That doesn't make sense either.
Like I said, I don't think she planned on dying that night, but she wanted to call his bluff, is what is being speculated on right now. So, but this part of the story is confirmed. Multiple witnesses saw him go in the water and pick her up. This is not disputed. This is factual. Now, what comes next? Unfortunately, only one person is around to tell that story. Betty's not here. So the next part of this is all from Mack's testimony to the police. So
rest in peace, Betty. But Betty, you should have known when to hold and when to fold.
Yeah, my heart goes out to you, Betty. But
if it's even true, because you never know, this guy could have took advantage of the situation just to say he killed somebody. That may be something he wanted to do, and that was an easy target.
That's kind of where a lot of people tend to lead when we look at this case.
Because first of all, there is absolutely no way I would ever kill somebody if they asked me to do it.
Not at all. No,
the
never.
only way I could do that is if somebody hurt one of my kids or my wife.
Yeah, I'd kind of become pretty heartless in a quick instant if someone or something harmed my family.
Exactly. My mind's blown, no pun intended. That sounds bad. I shouldn't have said that.
Good God.
I shouldn't have said that. That was a bad one to use. But
unfiltered. We're not editing. Sorry, guys. It's just who we are.
I just can't believe I couldn't imagine doing that.
No, me neither. But
and for what? What does he get out of it?
Well, that's where this next part comes in, where this is Mack's own account here. These are his words. So Mack said he picked her up and they drove out, and on the ride, they talked for a long time. They talked about their relationship. They talked about her feelings, talked about his feelings. They talked about where things went wrong, where things went right.
Did they do an autopsy on her to see if she had any other markings on her body, like see if maybe she'd been strangled or any bindings?
In the reporting I saw, I think they just saw for what it was, and they just...
So the medical examiner probably didn't even try to go into his job. He was probably like, "Yep, shotgun blast to the head."
And that tends to happen in a lot of cases, more than you'd think. There's a lot of times when someone dies where they don't do an autopsy.
They don't do a toxicology report to see if, because I mean, you never know. Betty could have been drugged. I mean,
yeah, but they just didn't do it. And at this time, forensics was like unheard of.
Yeah,
you know, like they didn't do it in the 60s. Especially,
the only thing they had was they could tell what type of blood something was.
Yeah,
or fingerprints, but they couldn't trace it back to anybody.
Yeah, there was no database. There was no DNA. There was no.
If you committed a crime and the victim had, say, A negative, but you had O positive, and they found O positive mixed with A negative, then they would speculate like, well, you're probably the guy because you have O positive blood mixed.
Yeah, but they couldn't connect it through DNA. Like they couldn't prove it was your O negative blood. If
and back then,
Jim
if
Bob
you had
down
a
the
good
road
lawyer,
also had,
you could just say, well, look how many people on this planet have O positive blood. It's the most popular blood type. That could have been anybody.
Exactly. But back to the case, he said that on the drive, she was very calm. And he said she kept on speaking about heaven as if it was a place she wanted to be. She talked about her faith. She talked about God. He said they got to the hunting property and she went back to the Jeep to get her duster because she was cold. Then they walked over to the water, raised his shotgun, and before he fired, he said to Betty, quote, "Give me a kiss to remember you by." And then he claimed that she kissed him. She said, "Thank you." She got in front of him and then said, "Now." And he raised it and he pulled the trigger.
This is not Yeller. Like, this is not just taking your pet out of its misery. Or
that's what he's saying. That's how he's saying it happened. And so
that is crazy.
But again, there's no witnesses to this. He's the only person that was there. He did it in a secluded area. She's not here to tell her side of the story. Matter of fact, she's got her... Never mind, I don't want to get too gruesome. But she can't talk, right? So that version comes entirely from him. Now, whether she actually kissed him, where anything happened, whether he just took her out there and said, "Hey, look at this pond. Go get your duster. I know you're cold." And then she stood in front of the pond and he shot her in the back of the head and blew her brains out. That's obviously a possibility, too.
You can't really hide a shotgun unless it's like a sawed-off shotgun either. It's like, she had to have known that he had a shotgun.
Well, they're going out to his dad's hunting property, so I bet she's just thinking, "Oh, he's got a gun, a hunting property. It's in his Jeep." Back then, everyone had guns in their car. Like, people were pulling up to school with, their shotgun rack in the back of their pickup, and it was just normal.
Well, I know, I get that, but when they get out the car and he's just going to grab the shotgun.
"Well, look at that squirrel. I'm going to go pop that real quick."
In the middle of the night?
Hey, you never know. But his story is that she wanted to die, and he told her how he was going to do it, and he did it. But again, there's no witnesses. So that version comes entirely from him. Now I'm going to throw a big wrench into this and introduce to you a note. Now, Hunter, this note, after tons and tons of authenticating and studies done by the Texas Department of Public Safety, was proved, in fact, through a lot of analysis, that this was in Betty's own handwriting.
Well, what'd the note say, Jacob?
In the note, she wrote that she did not have the strength to carry out the act herself, and that she had agreed with Mack that he would help her, and that he should not be blamed. That's pretty cut and dry. Now, we speculated a minute ago, maybe he did this out of malice, he was cold-hearted, but now this note comes into play, proved to be in her handwriting, saying exactly what happened.
I just do not believe for 1 second she wanted to die from a shotgun blast to the head. That's closed casket.
Maybe he talked her into it, maybe he was manipulative, who knows, but she did want to die, and she did agree with Mack that he would do it.
Maybe she did want to die, but I not even for 1 second believe that that's how she wanted to.
See, I tried finding the note, and I couldn't find it, because I want to see if she specified how she wanted to or anything. We don't know her wishes. We can just speculate based off how other people have their wishes at that time, but she really doesn't.
If you look up the suicide statistics, women almost never use a gun to do it.
Yeah, most of the time, and this just comes from me being in a lot of psychology classes in high school and college. Whenever you're dealing with men who self-harm and women who self-harm, men tend to take more drastic, immediate measures, such as gunshots, or hanging or falling off things or standing in front of vehicles, things that,
Because
you're
men don't care about their image after they're gone. Like, they don't worry about that, but women do.
maybe not even image. Maybe it's just guys are more definite in their thought process. And if they want to die, they're pretty set on dying. Whereas a woman, not to speak about any women particularly, but they do things such as taking pills or cutting their wrist or things that if they escalate can lead to death. But if they're caught in time, you can come back from them and you can heal and you can still live. Like I said, that just comes from a lot of classes I took, and we broke down to psychology about why women do it that way and why men do it the other way. Now, I'm no psychologist, and this is not a psychology platform, so I'm not going to sit here and act as if I am, but that was always something that was very interesting to me because it does reflect the thought processes of males and females. So now everything at this point in the case becomes very, very complicated because on one hand, you have a confession from Mack, you have physical evidence, you have a gun, you have blood, you have a body, and then you have signs of preparation. He brought weights in his Jeep. He brought a gun. He planned for this to happen.
Oh, yeah, 100% pre-planned, premeditated.
But
See,
on the
here's the crazy thing. Like, today, it's kind of popular in Canada right now. If you're dying of an illness and, like, you don't want to be alive anymore, like, you can go to the doctor and they'll give you a shot that's going to kill you.
yeah, euthanasia is a big thing.
What is it, medical suicide?
Yeah, medically assisted suicide. But on the other hand, you have a note that suggests something closer to consent, saying she wanted this to happen. But just because she consented to it when she wrote that note doesn't mean she didn't change her mind. Like I said, that night, she wasn't dressed as if she was ready to go die. She was dressed as if she was ready just to hang out and then go back inside and lay in bed because she's in her pajamas. She didn't dress up that night to go and pass away. She was in her pajamas. Max showed up and she said, well, I'm going to see if he's real about this. And turns out he was. So the case goes to trial in 1962, and Mack's defense argues temporary insanity. He claims that he was psychologically overwhelmed. He really said that her repeated requests really just pushed him into a state where he wasn't thinking clearly. He said, the more she would ask and the more she would plead and the more she would cry, it made him have a distorted reality perception.
I don't believe that for a second, and I'm going to tell you why. Because to be classified as insane, so people that are insane, they don't try to hide the body, they have no remorse, and they also will almost brag about it and like taunt the cops, kind of like every single notorious serial killer.
Well, I hate to really disagree with you here, but I think that's a big generalization over anyone that's insane. I think a lot of the times it differs case to case. Like there are wide varieties of people that are insane that do try to hide the crimes, and then there are insane people that like to boast about their crimes.
But also, like, insane can be like how you commit the murder. Like,
yeah,
it's easy to pull a trigger, but to sit there and either stab somebody up or torture them and, all this other stuff, that's insane.
Yeah, that is insane by our definition, but by the court's definition, it's a different statement. So the way the court defines insanity would be something that refers to the state of a person during the time a crime is committed. And this is coming straight from a dictionary, law.com dictionary, saying this is for temporary insanity. This is a definition that says it refers to a state where a person is deemed legally insane at the exact moment of a crime, unable to understand reality or distinguish right from wrong, but is mentally stable before and after the event. Now, while this is rare, it has happened hundreds and thousands of times across the country. Now, the thing about this is it's very difficult to prove. But back to the case, whenever we're talking about this in this trial, it really becomes a reflection of the town. The courtroom reflects the town big time. So according to many reports, many people supported Mack. A lot of his classmates, community members, people who saw him as a good kid, people that knew his family and his dad all came to support him. Meanwhile, Betty's parents sat largely alone in this courtroom. Imagine your daughter was murdered and thrown into a lake or a pond, and you go to court and you're in the courtroom and there's crowds of people supporting the man who hurt your daughter, and you are just the lonely family there trying to get justice. So after a pretty short trial, the jury returns with a verdict, and this one is going to be not guilty by reason of insanity.
Did they show how long they deliberated for?
No, it really didn't say in a lot of the reports. Like I said, whenever it's back in the 60s, you're kind of lucky to get as much information as you get. Now, the thing about this is that the ruling is later overturned due to procedural issues, which come from a court case called the State versus Olson, which was happened at the Texas Supreme Court. So this led to a second retrial in Beaumont County. So what that means is that they changed the scene of the court. So instead of having it in small town Odessa, where there's a lot of people that have a lot of biases, they put it in a different county where they had different jurors that don't know his family, that don't know the situation, to see if they can get an even better reflection of the case. But unfortunately, all this work the court does and Betty's family's lawyers try to do, the outcome doesn't change. In December of 1962, again, Mack is found not guilty by reason of insanity.
I don't agree with that at all. I think that does he deserve first degree murder? No, maybe not even second degree murder, but I don't think that he needs to just be found not guilty. I think he needs at least involuntary manslaughter, because there has to be some sort of punishment for being able to do that to another human being, whether they wanted it or not. I mean, if that was to happen today, I guarantee you would get second degree murder.
I think so too. But like I said, temporary insanity is a real legal definition. And at that time, he has a lot of pull. He has pretty good lawyers. He has money that backs him. So
yeah, but see, here's the thing. Today, if you get charged being legally insane, you're going to spend the rest of your life in a mental hospital.
Not necessarily. Not if it's temporary insanity. Like I said, we'll have to look into this and do some studying, and I'll show you some things. But temporary insanity doesn't mean
temporary insanity. Yeah, you still go to a mental hospital, but once they classify you as no longer insane, you get out. But you
not
still have to
necessarily.
go get evaluated.
Yeah, and he did get evaluated by a lot of psychiatrists, saying that he was fine before the events and he was fine after the events, but during the events, they said he was temporary insane. And so he was found not guilty by way of temporary insanity, which means he walks. No jail time, nothing.
Just the reputation of being
Just the reputation. And like I said, in a small town where everyone is still supporting him, he has his football team showing up to his court cases. He has all his high school.
Was the trial held in the same county that the crime was committed in?
The first one was, and then there was a retrial, and it was moved, and it got the same result. And so Mack, man, this guy, he walks free, and he goes on to live a relatively normal life. He goes to college. He works a few jobs. He lives in Odessa, and he dies in 2019. And I actually went on findagrave.com, and I found his grave. And so there's like a little bio, and it says that he died on January 5th of 2019 at the age of 75. So he committed a murder at 17 and lived
almost 60 years.
Almost 60 more years.
That's crazy.
Now it says right here, Jack, John Mack Herring attended Texas Tech University. He was married and divorced twice, and he worked as a dock foreman, a carpenter, and a welder. And he spent 25 years in his...
So he followed his dad's footsteps.
Pretty much. But he went on to live a pretty normal life. Like I said, he was able to get into college, get married, have a job. Betty, her story became something else. She wasn't able to live a normal life. Her life ended that night on the edge of a pond. And in the immediate aftermath, a lot of people in the area, and even now to this day, some blame her. They blame her in the sense of she wanted this to happen. She wanted to die. She talked about it, and she was so persistent enough to talk someone else into doing it for her. Now, I don't see it that way. I see Betty as a victim and as an empath who really cares for people, as a Christian who has a bias to love people first, and as a girl dad, I can only imagine the hurt she was going through and all these things that she did.
I mean, yeah, that would be totally insane. Imagine, which I'm sure her dad being a preacher, he was trying to give her some hard love, but imagine that happens to your daughter and you got to live with that the rest of your life. Like I talked about earlier in the episode, like people being so insensitive back then, like they were so insensitive that they didn't care about how you felt. It was all about how they wanted you to feel.
And the guilt he must have had as a dad to learn that how hard he was on her, sure to the point where she wanted to not be alive anymore. I don't know how I would feel as a father if my kid ever told me they don't want to be around. I would second guess everything I say to them for the rest of my life, because the last thing I want to do as a dad, as a man, is to make anyone feel like they're not worthy of life. So years later, her family pushed back on that idea, arguing that she was a troubled teenager. So her family came around and they recognized that she was hurting and the environment she was in was not helping her. She needed help and she didn't receive it. She gave out tons and tons and tons of warning signs and nobody picked up on them. And that's what kind of makes this case
But that
linger.
wasn't the norm back then either. Like,
It wasn't. I mean, they didn't care about mental health. If you have mental problems, go work harder. Go put in some work and then get over it, right? They didn't care about how she was feeling. She said, "Hey guys, I want to die and I want someone to kill me." And they said, "Oh, look at Betty causing a scene again. Look at Betty just being drama queen of the year."
just a teenager calling out for help.
Yeah, and she
But
was
see,
just
nowadays people realize what's going on, and they realize that. So, like I was saying earlier, Betty just needed one true friend that would listen open-eared, not judge her and love her.
yeah, and that's where I'm going to say that Mack may have thought he was doing her a solid and doing what she wanted, but sometimes what you want is not what you need. And so if Betty wanted to die, and if you want to be a real friend, you don't give her what she wants. You give her what she needs. She needs to know that she's valued, and she needs to know that her life is worth living, and that her life is a gift from a creator, and that she needed to live it and not give it up so early and not let someone take it, not let it be on someone else's hands. And like you said, nowadays, I feel like there's tons and tons of resources, and I feel like people are more empathetic to mental health and to people that struggle and thoughts of self-harm and abuse and even suicidal thoughts. There's like so many resources out there to help you. And that's what makes this case just linger in my heart, because I think if this happened in today's time, I think it would be a way different outcome.
Absolutely.
I think Betty wouldn't have died. I think she would have known the resources. I think she would have been able to reach out, and I think she would have been able to live a long and fruitful life. But that's the hard part about it, is that she wasn't. She wasn't able to do that.
I still don't like Mack.
I don't like him either. I think
I've said it 100 times. I could not do that.
I couldn't. I don't care.
And you know that had to have haunted him the rest of his life.
And he can tell himself, "Oh, I did it because she wanted me to," and I'm such a good ex-boyfriend that I did what she wanted. But no, that is the furthest from the truth. And he knows it. Everyone knows it. And honestly, when you really look at it, this isn't just about what happened at that pond that night. It's about everything that happened beforehand, every warning that she had, every dismissal that people gave her, every moment when someone could have stepped in and they didn't. And instead, it all led to a kiss by the water, and then Betty left us. So that is the kiss then kill me murder.
Rest in peace, Betty. Betty should have folded. Shouldn't have called that bluff. Rest in peace, Betty.
Yeah, Betty should have just stayed with Ike and not called Mack on his bluff, because if he was crazy enough to kill you and he shows up, then you should think, maybe he's really about it. Maybe she was optimistic and maybe she thought, I'm going to get in his Jeep and he's going to talk me out of it and we're just going to move on. But again, hate to speculate. I like to look at things from a factual basis. That's just who I am. I don't like to look at things I don't know.
I think undoubtedly Mack should have got some sort of time.
I think so too, and that's where the time period really affects it, and status in small towns really affects it. And you see this happen a lot, and we're going to see this in a lot of cases we cover, that whenever someone has status, whenever someone has money, whenever someone has pull, that...
I mean, it's still kind of true to today.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Even in this area, like there's so many cases I hear about, not anything big, but like small cases that get dismissed because so-and-so has the right last name, or they have a really good lawyer and they get off of this charge that if Joe Schmo from the Cotton Belt of Dexter did that same thing, they're going to be locked up for years.
It's all about how much money you can give a donation to.
Yep. And the thing about judges is they are elected officials, politicians, and I don't trust politicians. So if you're going to tell me to trust a politician to be my judge, then I'm going to tell you, shove it.
Well, Jacob, thank you for bringing us that case this week. I've actually never heard of that before, so it was a good listen.
Yeah, I mean, I heard this a few years ago, and it's always stuck with me. And now even more as a girl dad, which is why I want to cover it, because I just can't imagine that situation. But if you guys are curious to see any pictures or anything, we're going to upload those on our social media, on our Instagram, and probably post them on my TikTok. And thank you so much for being a part of this journey. Again, like I said at the beginning of the episode, thanks for watching last week, and thanks for tuning in this week. And make sure you go follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Crime Daddies Pod. And on there, you can find the names of all of our other social media. So me and Hunter are pretty present on TikTok. We like to post a lot about our podcast there, as well as some other things on our social media. So go ahead, go give that a look. And if you're interested in seeing some pictures that relate to the case, we'll also have those posted. Make sure you go and listen to us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you don't mind, on Spotify and YouTube, you can comment on these episodes. So go
You
in the
can
comments.
also leave us a 5-star review, and that's
Yes.
going to help push us out on the algorithm so that we can get out there more.
Yeah.
If you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a review. You leave us a 5-star review. I don't even care what you say in a review. You can say we suck, but just give us a 5-star review. You can say, hey, I just fed my cat, and I'd be like, awesome, that's cool. Thank you for the 5-star review.
Yeah, the thing about us is we're going to respond to every comment. We're going to talk to you guys. So if you're interested in anything, if you want to talk more about these cases and hear some more opinions, feel free to reach out. DM us, drop a thing in the comments, and let's talk about it. And if you have any other case suggestions or things you want to hear about, again, we are active on social media all the time. Let us know. We want to show you guys that we value your support a lot. So just stay tuned, and we hope you guys have fun on this episode of Crime Daddies, and we'll see you next week.
Also, I'm actually currently on TikTok Live right now, so if you ever want to get a sneak peek into the following week's episode, if you're up late at night, because that's typically when we tend to record, join my live on TikTok, and you can get a sneak peek of what's coming.
Well, yeah, because we do Crime Daddies at night.
Well, it's because we got to wait till our wives and kids are asleep, let's be honest.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe one day we'll do like Crime Daddies in the morning.
Either way, thank you all again, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.